welcome to the Fantasy Boardroom. As always, I am your host, Tycoon, and I am thrilled to bring you another tremendous episode of the Fantasy Boardroom with another tremendous guest. Yes, we are back to having guests. The last couple of weeks have been nice, and this week it gets even nicer. So we're going to show his beautiful face so I can hype him up and you can see live reactions here. We've got our boy Herms NFL. Herms is a writer. He writes for Football Absurdity. He writes for Fantasy Six Pack. And he writes for Fantasy Pros. We have an actual Fantasy Pro in the boardroom tonight. He is the co-host of the Lateral podcast, which features personally my favorite personality in all of fantasy football content, which is the Lateral bot. So just screw Herms, go listen for the Lateral bot. It's worth every second of your time. And he is also an audio engineer. He is a producer. He is an editor, and he's an all-around kick-ass guy. Herms, welcome, my friend.
My dude! First of all, just on the record, so everybody knows, I apologize. Backstory, we were supposed to do this before the expo, but then I had the blood clots in my leg. It was a whole thing. I spent, I think that entire day or the day before just running around, doctors, hospitals and stuff. We couldn't coordinate it, but we pulled this one off. So I'm just glad to be here. I'm very glad we got to reschedule this.
Considering it's only been 2 weeks, you're dealing with, I would say, not insignificant issues there. Just glad to see that you're in a condition to be able to be here. We hope that your health is manageable at this point in time, and you're going to be able to get through another beautiful season and enjoy your life more than anything.
Absolutely.
Shoot.
Absolutely.
Legs doing okay?
I think so. It kind of depends. When I'm sitting down, not really doing a whole lot, it's fine. But if I'm up and I'm moving around for too long, it kind of turns purpley. But it's fine. We're good. We're good.
Well, that's what pharmaceuticals are for, yes?
Pretty much, yeah. Shout out Eliquis. Wonderful, wonderful blood thinner. Definitely recommend.
Stay away from paper.
Dude, because this isn't the first time I've had this, and I'll tell you what, anytime I had a nosebleed, when I had my clots the first time, geez, that nightmare. So many tissues, so many.
I can't even fathom, frankly.
But we have more fun things to talk about.
We do have more fun, like discussing the AFC and NFC North. Now, anybody who's been watching the last few weeks, the format we've been going, rather than just going team by team, which to me gets a little bit boring. We're going to go into the divisions and go position by position within the division. And we're going to have a nice, simple, boilerplate start. And we're going to start with the NFC North and discuss the correlation of psychedelic usage and MVPs. So, we'll begin with you. Is there a correlation with psychedelic usage and MVPs?
The ayahuasca must be doing something because, look at what Aaron Rodgers has been doing. Between that and, boofing ivermectin, I'm sure there's something going on with his regimen of weirdness that it must be working. I don't agree with a lot of, his stuff and things that he says, but if it works and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So there's something to this.
I think there is something to this. Obviously, you hit the low-hanging fruit there of Rodgers and the ayahuasca. Percocet, we learned he has been playing on at times, too, although it's not a psychedelic. But let's say Aaron Rodgers is not opposed to his necessary substances. But also, I went back and thought about some recent MVPs. Now, there's no direct admission like we have with A-Raj, but we have the Tom Brady and the Tony Dungy picture. We have Peyton Manning's obsession with Omaha. Obsession. We have Cam Newton's wardrobe. We have 1990s Brett Favre. And can you tell me with a straight face, Mr. Steelers fan, that Terry Bradshaw never, ever, ever dropped a tab sometime in his life? In the 70s there. The evidence is there, I think. I think it's been staring us in the face for decades. That's just me.
And not only that, but dude, the 1970s Pittsburgh Pirates too. You know what I mean? Same stadium, okay? If I remember correctly, anyway. Dude, those guys were doing some whack shit. So,
I imagine back in the day didn't care at all.
So it's I'm assuming there was any sort of cross pollination across the Steelers and the Pirates, and they hung. Wouldn't shock me. Genuinely wouldn't shock me.
All right, then. So I think, so we think there's something to this. Maybe not directly. We don't have the hard proof, but there might be something to this. So, actually, I'm not going to spoil it since we're talking about the North today, but I'll circle it back. No, but seriously, with the quarterbacks, now, we don't have Davante Adams now with Aaron Rodgers anymore. So, how low do we move Rodgers down without his top weapon? Now, for me, I'm just going to jump in and say, not a ton, but because I think after the elite, top 5 or so quarterbacks, the next tier is relatively flat for me. I mean, there's higher upside with certain ones where you go. I mean, he's still that fringe QB1 in my mind.
Yeah, and a full disclosure, because this is going to come up as we go through the rest of the show. I have not done my post roster cut day updates to my rankings, so just throwing that out there. But these are still very recent. I mean, I've had to move up Rodgers for a while because I kind of buried him a little bit, but I truthfully don't see him going to the point in my rankings where he sits at a single digit, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, I can't get him too high because, like, outside of the years that he sat behind Brett Favre or got injured, the dude finishes within the top 12. Like, that, it's what happens by hook or by crook. It's just he's like that level of quarterback. But obviously, everything that you mentioned with Davante Adams no longer being in town, and then the fact that the best weapons in the offense are running backs, like it's gonna definitely take a hit. They're gonna have to do something a lot different with the offensive scheme than maybe we've seen in the past. So just by virtue of passing volume probably taking a hit, like he'll always be efficient. I mean, that's something that we can't ever discount, and he is like the 2-time MVP recently for a reason. But like, there are just going to be more higher upside options, and at his age, it's not like he's going to be scrambling around either to supplement that floor either. So like, I don't know, I'd feel a lot better about it if he was younger and ran, but like he'll be fine, but nowhere near the ceiling version of the Rodgers of old.
Right. That's why I think there's several options you need to take in front of him, but I think I have him just after like the Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins level. I mean, he's the first one after that, just due to, I think, the floor he still possesses. Another peek behind the curtains, we were talking a little bit last night, like you alluded to just right now. To really have your offense centered around 2 running backs in the year 2022 is a decision. So we'll see.
I mean, you can do it, but I mean, in today's NFL, I mean, it's bold. It's bold.
I think most of us anticipate, though, Aaron Jones' receiving usage to take a significant uptick this year without Adams. I mean, we've seen what he does in the games when Adams has been missing, even when he's been part of the roster. So I think that still leaves the floor there for Aaron. But yeah, like you said, there's no real upside on the high end. I mean, I think he's honestly probably got a tight window, probably got a ceiling of what, QB 9-10 maybe, and probably a floor of 14 to 15. I mean, he's going to fit in the small window.
Yeah, I mean, like if he has a few spike games like he tends to every now and then where he tosses like 4 or 5 touchdowns or something.
Yeah, he'll work the Bears a couple times this year. No problem.
Yeah, but like in overall finish, there's a decent chance he could maybe finish like a tick higher than that. But as far as like points per game, like, yeah, it's probably going to settle somewhere around there, I would imagine.
It's hard to envision otherwise at this point. I actually was way lower on him and had to move him up a little bit. I think I overreacted to the offensive situation and kind of discounted the fact that he's still Aaron Rodgers. So I had to creep him back up. But enough about this guy. We already hear about him plenty. And shout out Anthony, a.k.a. Rasta, big friend of the boardroom. We love him.
Hello.
All right. So with O'Connell in town, how about Kirk Cousins? Now, more context. You're from the DMV area, so you've got a little insight and an opinion here on Mr. Cousins. So please share it with the class.
Oh, my Lord. Okay, so, like, there are so many things that should have stopped me from supporting the Commanders a much longer time ago. I mean, like, that franchise is a mess. Dan Snyder is the worst. I don't know how I held on for as long as I did, to be perfectly honest. But what really did it for me is, and keep in mind, like, when I was a kid, like, I'm talking, watching Patrick Ramsey and Jason Campbell and, so, some of those guys. Like, I remember the training camp where, it was like Rex Grossman and John Beck competing for the job, and I'm just like,
John
okay.
Beck.
Oh yeah, throwback, unfortunately. Ugh. But like, obviously it would have been cool if what happened to RG3 never happened to RG3, but it did. And when Cousins stepped in, it was like, yo, this is by far the best quarterback. Like, like, obviously with the RG3 exception implied, it was the best quarterback play I'd seen. And
Right.
it was just, so it's like, okay, this guy, we got it. Thank God we drafted him. It worked out just fine, even though that insurance policy paid off. It was wonderful. And then they just chose not to sign him long term. They franchise tag him a couple times. I know.
That's the most insane executive decision in recent memory.
Them just refusing to commit and just ultimately just letting him go. I was like, nope, done. Don't care anymore. You guys, like, you've pushed me to my limits. Like, it's bonkers. And a fun fact about Kirk Cousins, because people always talk about the fact that, like, oh, he's kind of boring, like whatever. It's like, yeah, sure, but first, he has not finished outside the top 15 in quarterbacks since the year, I think it's 2015 or so. When did he become a starting quarterback? Do you remember?
Not off the top of my head. I want to say 2014-15 sounds correct.
Yeah. So last time he finished outside of that range, I think I said it correctly. The last time he finished outside that range, he wasn't a starting quarterback. He's been within the top 15 the entire time. And in that time,
that was his first starting year, correct.
Yeah. So, like, never finished below that. And he ranks 4th in passing touchdowns, 13th in passing yards per game, 5th in completion percentage since 2015. Like, this dude, he's efficient. He will get that ball to that receiver, and he chucks tutties. That's all that matters. Like, I will never stand for the Kirk Cousins hate. I can't do it.
He's a virtual lock for 4,000 yards and 25-plus touchdowns every year, and a lot at 29, 30, 35, 33 touchdowns. When he's been over 26, 27, 29. Like, one outlier 3,600-yard year. But he played one less game, so that should probably be closer to 39. Yeah,
and there you go.
Yeah, no, he's So I guess this is 2015. Here are his finishes as a quarterback: 10th, 5th, 6th, 13th, 19th, 11th, 11th.
And that 19th, I believe, was because he didn't start that final game.
Yeah, because he missed a game there. So
yeah, so
that's
if you take out that week, it still fits within the top 15. So
right, absolutely, yeah. Points per game, there's no doubt he was top 15 in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I should clarify. What I just read off was seasonal finishes, but also it's a testament to the guy's health. He's missed one game, and it wasn't due to injury in 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has that going for him. The best ability, as they say, availability.
So, how about this year, though? How optimistic are you with him with this? I think what most perceive as a coaching upgrade and very quarterback friendly.
Bro, dude.
And a reunion.
Exactly. So, like, for people, a lot has been made of this, but, if people have forgotten for some reason, or if they just never heard it to begin with, Herms has some news. Kevin O'Connell was his quarterback's coach in DC when Sean McVay was still around running the offense as the offensive coordinator under Daddy Shanahan. And those were some of the top level Kirk Cousins performances I definitely saw. So, like, it's a relationship with a guy that, like, he has extreme familiarity with from a time in which he was super successful. I assume that this, like, reunion, like yes, like, people have talked about it, like, whatever, like, yes, the connection exists, but, like, I cannot stress enough. Like,
not only
watched
a previously successful connection, but also two guys that are coming off of recent success. Kirk had a great season last year. O'Connell obviously had a great season, led an offense to the Super Bowl, led Cooper Kupp to a record-setting season. I mean, that's
dude, it's so perfect. And honestly, like, I cannot reiterate. Like, I watched Cousins every Sunday the entire time he was here. He gets a lot of crap, but, like, he's really good. And those stretches of time where those two guys were working together, like, I thought it was wonderful. Like,
I mean, 2016, 2017, QB5, QB6.
Yeah, like, it is so much more important than I think it is even still given credit for. Like how
I agree.
awesome this could be. Like, dude, I'm here for it. There are other ramifications that we'll talk about once we get to other positions, but like just sprinkle that in as the teaser. Like this Vikings offense.
There are two things, and one of them I will kind of touch on, but there are two things I think are not being given enough credence in analysis. And the first one is the O'Connell reunion with Cousins. And the second is Amari Cooper's departure from Dallas. I just don't think enough people are counting that as as significant of a loss as it is. So, I mean, we're not talking about the East today, but we'll touch on Cooper a little bit. But I think that's going to be a very big loss, and a lot of people really don't seem to think that it's that big of a deal. And I think they're very, very wrong.
I feel you. I definitely feel that.
All right. Now, how about we'll take a tier down from these fellows, but one guy with some excitement, Mr. Justin Fields. I like the player. I like his talent. I like his ability. I'm concerned about his situation. I think the Bears are going to be quite possibly the worst team in football this year. He has one weapon. I'm not part of the big Cole Kmet fan club. He's fine, but I'm not part of the huge fan club here. I like Mooney. He's the guy I'm considering the weapon. Monty's fine. There's a lot of guys that are fine. They're NFL talent, but
I feel that
they're more than just the guys, but they're still in general, not much above average talent. So I'm really concerned that he's going to be hampered just by a shit team, and that's going to stunt his growth this year.
I mean, there's a chance of that, but then there's also the possibility that because it's such a nightmare, he is forced to run for his life, which, for real NFL purposes, we're less than thrilled about, but for fantasy purposes, it only takes 1 point out of those 10 rushing yards, whereas 25 passing yards gets you know what I mean? So it's just obviously, weighted that way, we love to see it. So, I mean, it's not going to be pretty necessarily, but if he does end up scrambling enough, there's a decent chance he could end up with a quality high number of rushing yards to the point where he's viable. It's unfortunate they didn't do much to address the loss of Allen Robinson. I think a lot of people would have figured at some point in the NFL draft. I mean, I think they passed on George Pickens twice, which, by the way, as a Steelers fan, thank you, Chicago. But, and also any other team that passed, because we'll talk about that later. But, dude, it's Mooney and it's Kmet. I know we differ on that, but even then, it's still,
Kmet's going to get targets this year, but I'm just...
So it's it's that. Velus Jones, I thought he looked pretty darn good in doing the kick and punt return when I watched the preseason game against the Seahawks, but we don't really get fantasy points for that in most leagues. Don't really care how much that is going to happen. And then Equanimous St. Brown, we didn't even get the good one. He's in another team. And the reclamation project of Nikhil. Yeah. So it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
How
Justin
I wish
Fields.
How I wish Nikhil Harry could be a thing.
Oh my gosh. I too was one of those people. I feel duped. I do, but
and maybe 101s on Nikhil Harry, my man. That ruined the course of multiple dynasties.
Yeah, no, I mean, oh my gosh, for fun, I went through and looked back at some dynasty rookie ADP just because I got bored, and that's what I do in my spare time because that's who I am. What people missed on because we were dude, I feel so bad.
Between 2017 and 2019, looking at what analysts were suggesting for rookie drafts around NFL draft time is, we don't know shit, bro. We don't know anything.
It's the tricky part of this whole thing, but either way,
that's all I could say.
The point being on Justin Fields anyway, to bring it back on course, he will run for his life, and that will be helpful. I'm sure there will be some games where he is able to, face a level of competition that's not going to destroy him. But, I mean, I don't feel great about the weapons. I don't feel great about the offensive line either. I mean, that's something.
I haven't even gotten to that.
Yeah, the best lineman they had left over. I mean, he came over. Another thing, thank you, Chicago, for James Daniels now at the Steelers. Pretty solid guard, It's like, so, they're going to be a couple years away. I think long term, like dynasty managers that are, possibly, pondering what they should do with Justin Fields or how they feel about it. I mean, you have to stay the course. He's incredibly talented.
Absolute hold.
Yeah, and the fact that he can run as well as he, like, by the time they get good, hopefully he's avoided enough huge hits that, give him, shell shock syndrome that he's fine. But, like, I don't know, for 2022, like, super flex leagues, like, take him because he runs, but if you're playing single QB, like, I don't think you have to think about it at all.
No, there's not even a consideration there.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping he doesn't get ruined in a sense due to team situation, because I do think the kid has potential, and I would like to see it come to some level of fruition.
I watched it happen with Commanders quarterbacks for years, man. It's a very real thing.
I'm a 49ers fan, my man. It's been a rough go since Steve Young.
Yeah. Not great, Bob. Not great.
So we'll round out the NFC North here with Jared Goff. Where does the sun set with him?
If you're looking for a boring but kinda safe-ish super flex option, and you just want to punt the position, like there are strategic ways in which Jared Goff is valuable for your team. Like, it depends on your roster construction. Like, if you decide to go that route, then like, yes, draft Jared Goff. But outside of the narrow instance where you're doing this for a strategic reason, you could do better.
No, I'd have to agree. Like, if you're doing some kind of a super flex, like hero QB build, essentially, get your one stud, and maybe you've got 3 guys you might rotate on matchup, something like that. Goff is a tremendous guy there. I think he is going to have some big individual weeks, but I think it's going to be a very yo-yo season in terms of fantasy performance for Mr. Goff, personally.
I agree.
I see a lot of good and bad Goff.
No, for sure. And like, I really wish that Jameson Williams didn't have the health issues and the fact that he had torn his ACL as late as he did. In a world where he was already there, ready to go,
I'd be way more hyped.
Yeah, I mean, like, the weapons in the offense, like, on paper, they look pretty good, but it's just a matter of, it continuing to be figured out because, and I will say, like, for as bad as they were last year, obviously, like, and this is true in every sport, like, no matter what it is, like, you watch a team, like, they're bad. Like, their record shows they're clearly bad.
Right.
But they play well enough to the point where you can at least see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
Because there are some teams where you just watch it and you're like, dear God, like horrible. But at the very least, I will give the Lions that credit because watching them last year, I'm like, dude, like these guys are fighting pretty hard. Like, I admire, and like
that's why we love Dan Campbell.
Exactly. Got to bite those kneecaps. Got to wipe your own ass. Just do it. Also, this season of Hard Knocks has been wonderful.
I mean, speaking of Goff, I don't know if you watched the episode from last night yet.
I have not yet. I will catch up soon. I don't want to
spoil it, but there's a good money quote for, I'm sure you did hear about the players held, or the player run practice that they held. That was in the media anyway, so no coaches. Yeah. And he had a couple of good lines in there.
All right. Go Jared Goff. Yeah, you go. Yeah.
And it was funny, too. I was telling my wife before the episode, I was like, man, we just haven't gotten enough Goff yet. And she's like, why would we want to get more Jared Goff? I'm like, do you not remember the Rams Hard Knocks with Goff? We got some of the best lines from this guy. Let's go.
Exactly, dude.
And then it happened.
He's a really cool dude. Say what you want about, him as a quarterback and the ups and downs in his own career, but, like, he seems pretty chill. I like Jared Goff. Yeah.
There's actually another good scene in the episode last night where it's like some kids that intern for his clothing company. It was kind of cool. And kind of a glimpse into the dude that he is. I liked it.
Nice.
Interacted well with the kids. I liked it.
It's always good.
And say what up to them boys.
Hello.
Big fan, big friend, and as well as a Ruffy Bomb. Complimenting the studs that we are. Something like that.
Gracias.
All right, so we're going to move on to running backs. Now, this is a really stud-heavy division, honestly, at the position. Going through some of the previous ones, it's kind of like, do we even care about running backs in this division? But we do, for sure, in the NFC North. Dalvin Cook is one of the few remaining workhorses that are left in the league. We already kind of touched on Jones is probably prime for a higher receiving volume without Adams. And expectations are pretty high for DeAndre Swift. So, I love the NFC North running backs personally. These are three guys that I all have in my top 12. Do we need to pump the brakes on any of these guys? Optimism too, unwarranted?
Three of the four of them are in my top 10. Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones. I think in that order. Checking my notes. Yes, so in that order. So they can run very, very well. Another thing they all have in common, very good pass catchers. And we did talk earlier about, the lack of receiving options for Aaron Rodgers, at least at the wide receiver position specifically in Green Bay. Aaron Jones is the lead receiver. Okay. Dude.
He is. That's why I can one.
Yeah. He's shown in the past he's capable of handling, a sizable receiving workload as well. He's going to be fantastic. And dude, even taking it back to Hard Knocks, just some of the coaching suggestions from Deuce Staley, shout out, former Pittsburgh Steeler. I love Deuce
so much. I can't say enough how much I love Deuce Staley, dude.
Of course, man. Well, and also, again, anytime I get to shout out former Steelers or the Steelers in any way, I will always do it. So that's why he's awesome. But just the way that he's, I think it was the second episode, just really hammering into DeAndre Swift, just being yo, bro, if it's there, just go, do the thing, building up that level of confidence.
He stays receptive to the code. The quotes seem like he is, but man, I hope he really applies what Deuce was trying to tell him.
Absolutely, man. Dude, it's.
If he can establish his inside game, dude, he's going to be unstoppable.
Yeah, and honestly, it's the. It could probably end up being a lot like stuff that we've seen from, to kind of seamlessly transition a little bit, just stuff we've seen out of Dalvin Cook. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's the three are all going to be right there, and I think any deeper the only thing that I think really needs to be discussed of the running backs in this decision, at length, because those three are so good and we feel good about that, is David Montgomery. I was somebody that was a little concerned that with the new offensive coordinator coming into the fold, his background as I can't remember, some position coach on the offensive side with Green Bay, and then Matt Eberflus himself, a defensive guy, but the head coach is still involved in the offense as well, and but the Indianapolis of it all. So it's there's a couple situations where running backs maybe split a little bit. I don't know. We'll have to see. I remember a couple of weeks ago, or maybe, I don't know, my understanding of time is completely horrible these days, but Khalil Herbert did get carted off at the practice field. Maybe that was just a precautionary thing. I never saw any follow-up about
I think Herbert's been okay, but actually I can't even go off my show sheet notes because it's changed a little bit. Ebner has faced an injury since then.
Him too.
So
he's looked pretty good, man.
He was, really yeah. Reports were really good in out of camp. He looked good in preseason. My initial take until Herbert was carted off and Ebner. I cannot, for the life of me, remember exactly what his issue was, but until they suffered those minor injuries, hopefully minor. I was just afraid of just too much of a split at a certain point because Herbert showed out last year when he had the opportunity. So and
he's so good.
That combination with what I expect to just be a weak offense in general. Again, I like Monty, but I just feel like he is not being set up for success this year. He's not.
And honestly, I hate to actually,
ankle injury for Ebner. That's what it was.
There, you gotcha. And there's part of me that kind of hates to say this, but also I feel like people could maybe benefit from at least entertaining the possibility of this being a reality. How we view David Montgomery and his situation with the Chicago offense and the reality of what Dameon Pierce is looking at in the Houston offense. I don't mean to suggest that either one of them are horrible, but and I love somebody like Dameon Pierce and, if people were seeing, my, quote unquote evaluation process tweets in February, I've noted as somebody who really liked Dameon Pierce even before the draft. But the reality of the situation is when you are a workhorse running back, quote unquote, in an offense that just really doesn't have that going for it. I think the Texans showed some pretty decent run blocking for Pierce in the preseason, which may make this analogy imperfect, but there's still enough there that it's like, kind of got to cool your jet. I thought it would be nice to weave in a topical.
No, that is, well, actually, not long before we went live, I saw a tweet that I think kind of summarizes what you're saying perfectly, and that was, sorry to the person who tweeted it, I don't remember who it was. If I remember, I'll give you credit later. But he said, man, Dameon Pierce is going to have so many 19 for 86 lines this year. And that's what I think is probably true.
Yeah, like I adore both players. I think they're good players, but it's
more than just about them.
Yeah, like at a certain point, like the context of the situation has to factor in. The offensive ecosystem has to factor in. Like what the Bears have going for them is not going to be, super high value touches for David Montgomery on more often than not. So like you have to, and I think he's fairly justly ranked at this point. I mean, again, like I said before, haven't done my post roster cut re-rank yet, but I had Montgomery at 22. I think it's still fairly respectable. I think he's going to move down a touch now with some
volume floor, basically. I mean, that's kind of what we're.
There's nothing wrong with it if you built your team the way that you did with, like, say you filled out and you took a running back early, you filled out a bunch of receivers, and he falls to you a little bit later. Like, sure, you could do worse things, but like, I'm not really. And also, like, if I remember correctly, isn't this going to be his last year under contract too? Because this is the end of his rookie deal.
This would be year 4, yeah. So
who knows, man? Who knows?
Sometimes those guys just get ridden into the ground,
dude. All sorts of things. Redraft and dynasty. No idea. No idea what to do.
The guy I'm just generally avoiding, frankly, unless he falls and becomes a great value, which he has a couple.
Well, that too, yeah. But when in doubt, just don't do it. That's
basically. Yeah. It's got to be one like, oh shoot, Montgomery's still there. All right, cool. And then, but otherwise, forget it.
Hell yeah.
So wide receivers, always my favorite position. That's what I played growing up. I mean, not on any legitimate level, but that's what I like to play because I have no other football skills other than that I can catch a football. I can't run, I can't throw, I can't block, can't do anything, but I can catch. So we'll start on the lower end here, the land of the lost. We have a cast of virtual nobodies, as again, we've already kind of alluded to in both Green Bay and Chicago. We've got Alan Lazard, baby, wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. That's no disrespect to Alan Lazard, by the way, just to say. And we have Darnell Mooney, who is actually, I think a lot of people like a lot. I like him a lot, but I don't know that he's really a true one. As talented as he is, I mean, I have my doubts about that. So,
yeah, I mean,
do we have any real hope for any receivers on either of these teams? I mean, do you think Lazard will even really be the wide receiver 1? And I mean, not counting Jones as the main receiving target, I mean, like, at the end of the year, amongst just wide receivers, is he going to have the most receiving yards?
He's shown on a couple different occasions that he is at least capable of playing to a very high level, but flashing some sense of capability and doing it consistently are two very different things.
Right.
And like and I even tweeted about it today because I saw like the
oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, the
they're gonna use wide receiver by committee.
Yeah, like LaFleur was like wide receiver. It's like, bro, that's what a receiving core is. It's it's a huge committee, like that. Whatever. Like I thought that was hilarious. It annoyed me so much. But like but then I saw people look at that and then be like, so the bad news for Lazard. I'm like, dude, like that has been like built in as a risk the entire time. Like if you did not factor in the possibility that like the ball would be spread so much amongst the receivers in Green Bay that nobody would have a dominant, alpha quote unquote type performance by the end, then you did it wrong. And like people that are now just double counting it against him because LaFleur said so.
Yeah, that makes no sense. That was already going to be the case. Like you said.
Like and I wrote about Lazard in article that I did over at FantasyPros I made my sleeper picks. I still think he's a decent sleeper pick, but even in my summary, like at minimum, a modest return on investment can be had, referring to Lazard, and fantasy managers could end up with a weekly flex option. At best, Lazard could flirt with robust wide receiver 2 production and be a difference maker as a 9th round pick. That is at best. And even then, robust mid wide receiver 2. I mean, that could mean like wide receiver 16, 17, like nothing like super like, whoa, he broke, like nothing crazy. So like that, I'm a little bit nervous about. But whereas what we were talking about before with Darnell Mooney, I happen to like between the two of them, because they're both in very similar situations, I adore Darnell Mooney. And there were stretches of time last year where he just absolutely went bananas. And because, Allen Robinson basically just took the year off. Because, I mean, it seemed he was over the whole thing. He just wanted to get out, whatever. And, like, dude, like, Darnell Mooney really showed out, man. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed that. Have it pulled up on FantasyPros. PPR scoring, he finished at 27, man. Like, that was pretty good. And that was with, really not always doing it super consistently. So, like, I imagine now that he is locked in. He had,
like, a massive target share, though. And even still, I mean, it seems like in the current Bears situation, that's kind of his ceiling is 27.
And it did take him a little bit too. Like, I will say, like, it really, like, probably the first month of the season or so, I remember, like, it started slow, but by the time that it really took off, like, I don't know, I'm just hoping that, like, now, like, the distraction of all of that's gone and it's just him. Like, and also I say this to people all the time, I cannot prove it or point to any examples necessarily, but they're actually, well, I guess I could if we, had permission to show film on the show and I could throw it up on the screen. But there are times that I watch him and his ability to, separate and do stuff after the catch that I squint and see Deontay Johnson. Like, I do. And like I'm not necessarily saying like he is the next, because that would just be, it's too soon to necessarily say that, but I don't think I'm unjustified in my optimism, because like, dude, like there were times, like especially even in his rookie year, where like he just, like, the ball didn't even get thrown to him, or if it did, it was nowhere near him. But like there are cut-ups of film where he's torching the guy covering him, just absolutely. Like, he's
if you just put together a highlight reel, like, Mooney will look damn impressive.
Yeah,
he's got signature plays.
Yeah, I think he's capable of being.
He's taken some souls.
100%, man. And they will address the receiver position at some point in free agency in the draft next year, I presume. But even when that happens, like, like, dude, Darnell Mooney's good, man. I really think,
and he is good. I think he could really, really shine, man, if he had a legit elite kind of running mate. I think
Cole Kmet, man. Cole Kmet, I'm just saying.
I'm more talking if he could have a guy like a Justin Jefferson, a Cooper Kupp, he could be Allen Robinson or Adam Thielen.
I feel
like that's what I'm saying.
I think he'll get to that point too, because like I said, like it would be nuts of them not to address that core soon.
But I would like to see him get somebody better than him, not somebody that makes him the one is more.
I feel that.
Like
I
would really like it to see him be the high supporting guy, where I think if he's got a legit top 5 level type of fantasy guy on the other side, could be a situation where, can Justin Fields support 2 wide receiver 1s in this offense? And then we'll talk about the Godwin and Evans and whatever, examples we want to use from recent years, how that can happen. So like, that's what I'd like to see to help Mooney get to his potential. I think he needs that guy to help take off some of that primary coverage just for it to be more consistent. And maybe it also improves as Fields grows. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
But either way, at least for this year, thumbs up from Herms.
So what about, we have a question here from Dustin. What about Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs? Between those two, who's the wide receiver 1 there in Green Bay? I mean, he sold on Doubs' preseason performance, or Watson with higher draft capital getting a little more of a role in season?
It's not either of them. I mean, Christian Watson he's a fascinating prospect with a lot of interesting tools at his disposal, but playing at the level that he did with the, it's going to take time for that to work out. And Doubs, I will say, I enjoyed watching, because once upon a time we thought Carson Strong might be an interesting prospect. So
I thought that too, but no.
So by virtue of watching Carson Strong, I was like, man, this guy he keeps throwing to is pretty good. And, like he did fairly well in some, senior ball exercises and stuff that, like I would record the things on NFL Network and sit back and watch the different drills. Like Dubs could be an interesting depth receiver at some point. Like, I don't know that his ceiling is ever going to be the one in an offense, but I guess to answer some semblance of the question, the person that I believe in making an impact soonest may be Dubs, but long term, if everything clicks between the two, Watson.
I would say I agree. And Dustin, we'll get to Komet in just a minute. We're almost to the tight ends here. And all right, so we got, and honestly, as we go through these wide receivers, we'll be very brief when we get to the Vikings, because
we know
that one doesn't take much explanation.
Yeah.
Justin Jefferson is legit. He's my wide receiver 1.
Same.
I think he's yours too.
Mm-hmm.
And while Adam Thielen is aging, we're just gonna knock it out right now. He's aging, but he's a touchdown machine. The offense is going to be humming. For me, he's still a low wide receiver 2, and probably even better.
And worst case, they have Jalen Reagor now. So let's. I had to say
the Eagles are the biggest troll organization, trading Arcega-Whiteside to Seattle and trading Reagor to Minnesota. Like
look at what you did to us.
Exactly. Sick person. Well, no, I more feel for J-Jaw and friggin' Reagor. Like,
that doesn't
they have
help.
to go and be in the same locker room with these dudes that they've been compared to and clowned about for the last 2 years. Like, that's poor guys. That's rough.
Yeah, that's definitely
just from the human element. That sucks.
That's one of those things that I feel like Jigsaw would do in one of the Saw movies.
Dude,
like that. You have let us down.
All right, so I guess we'll go back to the Lions here. So you mentioned, Goff, when we were talking about Goff, you mentioned the weapons don't look so bad this year. So last year it seemed kind of bleak. I think there was some optimism about St. Brown as a rookie, but still was he 4th round pick, so it was. I still think kind of muted because he went lower than a lot of us that were analyzing this thought he was going to go. So we're like, oh, shoot, what did the NFL team see? Well, it turns out they missed it. We were right. Chalk one up for the fantasy analysts.
Boom. Yes.
But also they've signed DJ Chark. Jameson Williams should join the team, midway through the year. At some point, we'll see how he is, post late ACL tear. So, but still, talent-wise, we know he's a guy. And then he's still got Swift and Hawk. So do you think any of these wide receivers, number one, is going to command a large enough, or mainly, do you think any of these receivers are going to command a large enough target share to be real significant in fantasy? Obviously we saw what St. Brown did at the end of last year, but does the addition of some extra talent, is that going to kind of change the distribution?
Probably at some point, but at the same time, like what St. Brown did so well was getting him the ball quickly and letting him just do his thing, and that was super and people point out like, oh, well, it took till Swift and Hawk and all them to get hurt at the end of the year. It's like, okay, sure. But at the same time, he also did what he did, like even with a runway cleared for him to do stuff, you still have to take off. Am I right? And he did. And
it still counts. It's like when you talk about players. Well, if you take away their 3 highest scoring games and they're only this, like, okay, well, those 3 games count. So
yeah, like doing that type of, and there are ways to do stuff like that in terms of constructing an argument in a way that is, disingenuous versus like actually, we don't have time for examples. Either way, the point being with St. Brown, like a lot of it also, like one of the things that I felt like took a while, at least early on last season, was, the version of the Lions we saw at the beginning of the year with Anthony Lynn calling all the plays versus the version of them that we saw. And I can't remember this guy's name to save my life. I think he's still the same offensive coordinator from last
Johnson
year. Yes. There we go. That guy. I knew it was something incredibly common sounding.
Yes.
So yeah, like that's the influence, like that version of the offense we saw when they've, kind of phased out Lynn's influence and based off of what that was, if that ends up, being what we expect to see from the offense, and from watching a couple of their preseason games and stuff, like it seems kind of similar to what they're going to try to do. And watching Hard Knocks, like Amon-Ra's going to be fine, man. Like, and also that part, the episode where he's doing the thing, like naming everybody that got picked, like, dude. There's something about that, just like I guarantee you, we put that man through an X-ray machine. We're gonna see that dog in it. Like
dude, his dad has raised those kids to be hard. Put it that way. I would never f with Mr. St. Brown, any of them,
none of them, dude.
So, no, St. Browns are yeah. So now I love the Sun God as well. I was actually more. He's one guy that I've been consistently moving up throughout the offseason. Because I did have trepidation about, really just the late season breakout, and that did seem to coincide with the injuries to Swift and Hawk in particular. But the play calling shift is significant, and really I was not giving that enough credence. And I do think it's going to be a general shift in offensive philosophy, and Goff will be more comfortable in the passing game now in his second year, just in Detroit in general. I mean, first few games with the team, keeping it as simple as possible with screens to the backs, heavy running, obviously, again, with Lynn's influence, heavy running anyways. So, and people sometimes call it lazy. I really don't think it is. Sometimes I think it's overlooked. Guys develop and grow year over year, especially younger guys. You see much bigger jumps from year 1 to 2 to 3 than you do. Yeah, okay, when we're talking, year 8 to 9, okay, I'm not expecting much difference. But I mean, this is the time in their career that you do see that. So the growth has to matter for something. And maybe I buy a little too much into some of the Hard Knocks footage, but how do you not love what you see from Amon-Ra St. Brown, dude? How do you not? Are you a human being or not?
It's my first season watching it too. So like I've heard on podcasts for years in the past about the Hard Knocks bump. And like I was aware of what the show was and all that stuff. Like I had a decent idea, but like I was like, what, people are really going to let a TV show influence but hey, look at me now. I am those people. I'm guilty of it. And like all in all, like he's still being drafted as a wide receiver 3, as I think he should.
Right.
Like I don't have him ranked like absurdly high. I think according to my rankings, I am right dead in line with ECR at 30. But just with his size, skill set, and what we expect him to do in that shift in philosophy, like the debate we spent all offseason having was pointless. Like I don't think he will necessarily immediately become a superstar in year 2, but there was once upon a time where the year 3 breakout for a receiver was a thing. Remember that? Remember how we all followed that rule forever? Then
Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase happened and everybody forgot.
Yeah, we just decided that doesn't happen anymore. So it's like, okay, patience. See ya. Boop. Like, dude, it'll be fine.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. All right, Dustin. Fine. Herms, I'm going to just leave this to you because I honestly can't do it. So please sell Dustin on Komet. Please.
Okay, so here's the thing. Full disclosure, I am one of the original card-carrying members of the Colt Komet Club. I love the dude. Have his jersey. Not going to lie. But here's the thing. So, and I wrote about this in an article over at Fantasy Pros about offenses that either favor or hurt tight end production. And there are a few sticky stats year over year that can really, serve as indicators for production. And for as much as people like to chase previous year's touchdowns or, over penalize players for not scoring touchdowns, which in Komet's case, definitely something that happens a lot. We can't really look at that. So and I did an absurd amount of tight end research or whatever. It's somewhere in my Google Docs. I made a chart. I did a whole thing. I plotted it out back to 2015 or 2016, I think. And so basically what you're looking for, players that can achieve somewhere over a 15% target share, just absolute evident opportunity for air yards and just indication in the past that okay, well, at least this guy's been on the field a ton. And, last year he finished tight end 22 overall in half PPR. not great, but that's because he scored 0 touchdowns. The only touchdowns he scored in his career were in his rookie year. But all of that said, 83.7% of the team's total snaps, the 11th highest target share among tight ends, and the 12th most air yards per game among tight ends per fantasy data. Shout out. So, in essence, the dude's been on the field a ton, but Matt Nagy's obsession with just throwing in Jimmy Graham in weird situations in close, like, it took away red zone opportunity for Kmet. Not to say that he never had it to begin with, but like touchdowns, like, you know, for especially a tight end, like it's either going to be a huge
if you're not on
bumper.
the field in the red zone, I mean, you're
So, like, basically, like, Graham's gone. We talked about the fact no one else is there, and it's clear that the underlying information shows the Bears like having him on the field a ton. So at some point, all of that has to pay off. And I've said this on the timeline, like, there is a huge chance Cole Kmet is a top 10 fantasy tight end on volume alone. Whatever happens in the touchdown department is up to him, or, well, to some degree at least, but you know what I mean? Like, this dude could easily see over 100 targets. Like, whatever you want to think about the player, fine. But for the game of fantasy football, it's Darnell Mooney and who else for like the 5th time that we've said it. Like, it's just, you know, strategically, it makes so much sense to invest in him.
And an old, at least formerly foundational fantasy thought, a young growing quarterback leans on the tight end as a safety valve, especially one that's young and growing with him.
100%, man.
So I actually didn't realize those peripheral stats. So that is really intriguing. He said 83.7% of the snaps on the field. Like, that's huge. He's always on the fucking field. Wow.
Yeah, dude. Like,
that matters.
It's not his fault. It's not his fault.
No, the Bears are just a dumpster fire. So, but I mean, volume alone. Like, so, well, yeah, I might.
It's a good case to make, man. It's a good case to make. Like,
maybe you sold me while you were trying to sell Dustin.
I mean, good.
I mean, he did look good in preseason too.
Excuse me. Yeah,
the drives with the ones. I mean, he was making plays.
He's my tight end 8, dude. Like,
okay, like, I just moved him up to 13. I had him at 14, but I previously had Mike Gesicki at 13. I think I'm just gonna.
How the mighty have fallen.
Yeah. Can you like just take a player off a list? Is there a way to? You're the Fantasy Pros employee. How do I just delete Mike Gesicki from Fantasy Pros? That's the goal.
If you go all the way, like when you have the tool pulled up, there's an X. You already know. You're just being okay. Okay.
Right, no.
Yeah, there we go.
And no, I didn't mean just from my list. I mean from Fantasy Pros.
Like, the entire. Yes. I would have to talk to our developers about that. I'm sorry. That is not. That is beyond my hands.
So, all right. So I think that's one of 2 potentially intriguing tight ends here in the North. Also got TJ Hawkinson. We've been discussing the Lions offense here. I'm going to start with this one and just say I'm actually a little bit muted on Hawk. Frankly, he's a guy that I think falls into just that Dawson Knox, Hunter Henry kind of bucket.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I have him. I don't think there's a super high ceiling, although he probably has a slightly higher floor than those guys. He'll probably get a little more volume, but I do think, obviously talking about St. Brown and the addition of actual other legitimate receivers to where he's not the second best pass catching option behind Swift. Now he's 3rd at best behind, him and St. Brown. Might even be 4th now. I don't know. I don't think Goff is going to be as reliant on him, even though he wasn't really anyways. So I don't really see where it's going to come from with Hawk this year.
And not only that, man, but like, I got to be honest, like, and not, again, imperfect comparisons, because that's the thing that I enjoy doing. But we saw, I guess, a similar enough situation with a former Detroit Lions tight end in the past, former 1st-round pick. We thought he'd be a lot better than he actually was. Yeah. But we insisted that it was going to continue working out. And then, his name is Eric Ebron. Like, it definitely, like, I mean, the huge spike here in Indy, like, sure, with that aside, like, there are, and it's a lazy example because it's another Lions guy, but there are times where and not just tight end, but this can be true of any other position where we expected something out of them as a prospect. We saw the draft capital, so we're just like, well, yes, it has to work. Now for tight ends, we have to be a little bit more patient because unlike, any other position, like learning how to play tight end at the professional level, like that just does take time. And the year 3 thing about the receivers we were talking about before, it's very true for tight ends. So like I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit on that front, but like, and I don't know, dude, I mean, at least for the first couple of years, like I was a little bit worried about, his catch percentage. I know like people say like, oh, drops don't matter, but like drops only don't matter if you have a high enough number of targets to really counteract that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, for instance, like a lot was made of, like
Deontay.
Yeah. But like he receives so many targets and it's like, well, if you receive that number of targets, like who cares? Like,
right, yeah, or DK Metcalf, whatever. Same
yeah.
thing.
So like, but at Hawk's level of targets, like, he hit 101 in 2020, but his first year, 59, last year, 84, like he still has butterfingers just enough to the point where it bugs me, like he's a good tight end. I don't know that he ever becomes the great tight end that we wanted him to be. So by virtue of that alone, like I am similarly sheepish on him as you are, but it's not going to stop me from drafting him if he falls. But if I'm in a league full of people that are still convinced this is just going to be a thing and he's going to be Gronkian or something, then like, no, like I don't care. Like you can miss me with that. Plus Irv Smith, another, same division, similar, like, well, at least in terms of just like, wow, this guy's an incredibly good athlete, but we haven't really seen him on the field a lot because he's been banged up. I would rather take the flyer chance on Irv Smith at cost in that new offense than pay up for TJ Hawkinson. I would rather invest in Cole Kmet. Or if you really want to, if you're nasty and you just want to do the crazy thing out there and just see if, good old Bob Tunyon comes back for another barnstorming season with Aaron Rodgers, which also not impossible. I mean, look, somebody's got to catch those touchdowns. Like, like he'll never do the 2020 thing again for sure.
No. That is an aberration for sure. But I guess you got a touchdown. What I was going to go into or next was going to be Smith and Tunyon. But yeah. I mean, Komet's the prize in this division ultimately amongst the tight end group.
You can make a better. Yeah, you can make a better justification to draft any of the other 3 at cost as opposed to Hawkinson.
Yeah. Oh, well, definitely at cost. I mean, even just in a vacuum.
Yeah. So, like, it's one of those things, man. Just one of those things.
Right. So that's the NFC North. Now, AFC North, we'll get into. Probably need to go a little faster to make sure we stay on schedule for you. So we'll make the QBs pretty quick because it's it's a split and it's clear and it's simple. So
yeah,
we've got hot or not. We're going to go hot. We obviously know that's Lamar. We know that's Burrow. So just in a sense, lightning round between the two. Who do you like for fantasy more this season amongst those elite guys, Lamar or Burrow?
Lamar Jackson, 100%. The amount that he runs, like, come on. It's just like you can't beat that.
And because I never miss an opportunity to pump one of my favorite predictions for 2022, and that is Lamar Jackson is going to win National Football League Most Valuable Player for the 2022 season. It is absolutely Lamar. He is my QB2. Lamar.
You heard it here
first. Against Joe Burr. Love the guy, but Lamar all day. Now we've got hot. Not, this is funny. This is how long ago the notes for this show was, man. I really should have updated this before. I said Brissett, and in parentheses, I had Jimmy G. So that's not happening. And I also had Trubisky, in parentheses, Jimmy G. Also not happening, obviously, because Pickett is proving to be, or at least sounding like he is good. So he may even be over Trubisky sooner than I anticipated earlier in the offseason. In fact, we can just say Brissett's probably not going to be fantasy relevant. So I'm actually just real quick question. How soon before Pickett takes over, do you think, Mr. Steeler?
I mean, I got to be honest, man. Like, they spent their time bringing the kid along, and that's going back to mini camp and even in training camp. But I think it's fair to say that anytime we saw him on the field in the preseason, he looked good. I was very impressed with where he's at, but at the same time, we have to remember that what he was showing was an ability to run a rudimentary version of the offense that would dink and dunk its way downfield. As much as Trubisky is frustrating, the most electric moments in the preseason were with Trubisky under center. Huge throws doing all of that. And there's a reason why, and the coaching staff has been on record as to why Pickett was firmly working with the third team for a long time, doing all that until they gradually worked him up to first team reps. It's the same thing they did with Ben Roethlisberger when he was, because if people remember, his first year was behind Tommy Maddox and Charlie Batch. Like, there's a nurturing process that, and like, look, who's going to question the Steelers process? Okay. Nobody like it. Exactly. So
if you don't like proof, I don't know what to tell you.
Like, I think there is a chance, and like the early schedule's not super friendly for my boys, gotta be honest. If Trubisky is just a nightmare, sure.
I think that's a lot of the reason why a lot of people think it's gonna happen sooner than later. I don't think I'm there yet either. I think I'm kind of with you, knowing the Steelers, but
because like I think the bye week is week 10. So like if we're gonna see a transition, like, because at that point we'll know, like, are we in playoff contention or not, and like how much do we really have to play for? Like at that, like, so that's kind of where I'm looking at it. I think it's week 10, but if I'm wrong, listeners, viewers, just check the schedule, look for that bye week. Like that's kind of about the earliest, barring Trubisky being a nightmare or getting hurt, obviously, but God forbid, knock on wood. But like it's, again, I'm impressed, but it was very, like, it was. Nothing Pickett did was mind-blowing to the point where he needs to start right away.
Yeah, you're in sync on that. I don't think that's Tomlin's style anyways. He was never going to start week 1. I don't think that's ever been in play, period. But
if he had really blown the doors off, and if Trubisky had done something to lose the job, I think it was in play.
Well,
but
all right, fine. Not in play short of some extreme things happening like that. Well, I guess it's not even super extreme in terms of Trubisky doing something to lose a job against Trubisky, but
yeah, I mean,
I like good Mitch though, so I try not to ride him too hard.
Mitchburg, let's go. Yeah. Ooh.
I had a question before there was a ruling in here about whether we'd see Deshaun Watson this year, so I guess we can just go ahead and skip that one.
I've talked about that man about as much as
and since we already know the answer, I don't want to talk about him anymore. That was the only real question: is if we're going to see him or not. Now
running backs, let's go.
Yeah, running backs. There's another division. These northern divisions, man, they're up in the cold. I guess that's part of it. Another studly division at the position. We've got Najee. We've got Chubb. We've got Joe Mixon. These guys are grade A studs. To which level in fantasy has been subject to debate, but I don't think anybody can deny that these are 3 absolute wonderful NFL running backs. Obviously, you want Najee first, but Mixon or Chubb, with Hunt potentially on the way out, who do you like between those two?
I mean, I got to go with Mixon just by virtue of the fact that I've been like, dude, that offense is nuts. And also, like, he did very well at different stretches of his career behind a less than stellar offensive line that did so much to improve itself in the offseason. Like, Alex Kappa, like Lyle Collins and there's one other guy, but either way, like, night and day difference for that dude, for that team with an offensive line that bad to make it to the Super Bowl and come pretty close. Dude, like it's largely the same team, and they just put a real NFL offensive line in front. Like, it's definitely that for sure. Because like for as long as Kareem Hunt's been in town, like he and Nick Chubb are just going to feed off of each other a little bit. And then like, there is a smidge of a benefit, I suppose, if you want to view it this way, with Brissett for fantasy purposes, selfishly for the running backs, insofar as they will be forced to run the ball more because it's Brissett under center. So in that narrow lens of looking at it, I suppose that is a boon to both. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely prefer the guy that, and also, I mean, Mixon has shown can handle a healthy receiving workload. We've never seen
he doesn't catch a lot of passes, but he can catch passes, and Chubb does not do that. That's a big thing. All right. Shoot. Again, I'm talking about the health of things, and we've gotten more news. Man, I really needed to update this sheet. So, Dobbins and Edwards. We know Edwards is starting the season on PUP there in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Dobbins doesn't seem like he's really going to be 100% come week 1. They have Mike Davis. That's
and
something.
Kenyon Drake.
Okay. Yeah, and Kenyon Drake. I forgot about that today. But back to, I guess the real question is, would you take Dobbins with a top 50 pick with what we know today? We know he's a good running back. We know that offense supports running back ones very well. But
all right, well,
Dobbins to get there.
I mean, just looking at my overall rankings, I mean, like he falls within the top 50. I mean, like I don't love it, but because even he's been snippy on Twitter. I'm sure you've seen it a few times.
It was at Shefty today. I liked it.
Yeah, I mean,
I like when players clap at Shefty. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, dude, like he's pushing back, throwing bows, being like, "Hey, come on, hey," like his confidence in his health is something, like I'm sure all players kind of have that faith in themselves. But I mean, what else would we rather hear them say? Oh no, you're right, I'm toast. So like at least so in that way it's good. But then like even if it does take a little while for him to get back up to speed, like taking time with a serious injury for a really talented player and a high volume rushing offense, like sure, I can be patient, like there are enough values in the dead zone this year and, later toward the end that like you can supplement that somehow. There are realistic builds. And also because like the other thing is you may not have to take him with a top 50 pick. That's the other thing. There are enough other people
I don't think you do.
Yeah. So it's like enough people are spooked at this point that it's like, like sure, let him keep falling. Like at this point, I feel so much better taking that chance.
I'm with you. I think for a while I was seeing him go like end of the third, and for me that was a little much. But no, I think he has been falling well into the 5th round, and at that point, risk versus reward. I mean, okay, you're not going to get the whole season of top production, but telling me he could be an ultra productive back from week 6 on, okay, sure. I mean, that's the prime time in the fantasy season. I can fill in till then.
Yeah. Because like these are all like, and honestly, it's true of all 4 of these running backs to some degree or another. Teams that run the ball a lot, and we're not sure how many passes they're going to catch, but they're going to run the ball a lot. That's the AFC North box of running backs. Like like it's the argument. It works. It makes sense. The entire division, like all 4 of these teams have a lot in common in terms of just overall philosophy of how they play the sport. It's one of the reasons I love it so much is because like AFC North football is football, man. Football. Like you know what you're getting out of it, dude. Like sure, PPR, it's a bummer to not get those points, but if you run enough, it's fine, I guess.
I mean, it's not like they don't pass. They just pass less.
And not so much to the running, but they'll catch the ball sometimes, I'm sure.
They use the running backs what they're for.
Exactly.
So that's fair.
Yeah, they don't call them the runny catchy boys. They call them running.
See? I think sometimes we overthink it. See? Thank you.
Bingo.
All right, wide receivers. We've got one elite group. We've got the Tiger Attack. We've got Chase and Higgins. Everybody loves both guys, so we're not going to go crazy there. The main question I have, can they both finish as wide receiver ones, and will they both?
I think they can, and I think I have it ranked that way. I mean, like, we've seen it at different points in the past. I mean, like, for some reason,
a lot of duos do it, but will these guys do it?
I think they can. I really do, man. Like, with how much they launch that ball and just how much of the offense is predicated on those huge plays, and the fact that both gentlemen are extremely successful in converting huge plays, like, absolutely. Like, they're, and just because I have to say it, like, anytime there's a good receiver that then is joined by another good receiver, like, this fallacy in people's brains that, like, two receivers can't, like, dude,
it's a good thing.
Yeah, like it goes back to the the weird doofusy thing that LaFleur said. Like, every wide receiver core it's a wide receiver by committee. Like, dude, these things happen, but like two guys operating over, like, hovering at least around or above like a 20% target share has happened in the past. It is feasible, and like when you have guys excuse me, as talented as Higgins and Chase, like, of course, dude, like, yeah, like, it makes me nervous about certain other factors in terms of, like, if they continue to ramp up the passing, what does that necessarily mean for Mixon? I mean, that's something I kind of overlooked a little bit, but that's beside the point. We're talking about the receivers now.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
That's what I was going to actually tie back in, though, because you mentioned the offensive line upgrades, and that actually has me more optimistic about these guys than it does Mixon. Because
Which is
I think
fair.
Burrow's going to have legitimate time for the first time in his career, and I guess if he can be more dangerous, this is going to be how. By giving him time with his elite receivers. So, yeah, I had Higgins a little lower. I still don't think I had him quite in the top 12, but I'd say by the weekend, he probably will be there for me when I go back and fix these before the weekend.
That man is super good.
He really is. And I'm a Clemson guy, so, I mean,
hey, there you go.
All right, so now we've got some depth questions across the rest of the division, I think. Bateman's wide receiver 1 in Baltimore.
Woo.
They have Andrews. Do we give a shit about any other pass catcher in Baltimore besides those two? For fantasy? No, I didn't think so. Me neither. Now, how about Cleveland? We've got Amari Cooper. Again, I think it's a bigger loss for Dallas than people realize, but we're not talking about Dallas. I think Amari Cooper has been one of the more underrated receivers during the course of his career. It's a damn shame. But for the first, 11 weeks, we've got QB uncertainty, or not QB uncertainty, but just Brissett. Cooper will probably still get his just by virtue of talent alone to, some level. But again, do we give a shit about any of these other pass catchers on this team for this year?
Maybe David Bell, and the only other one I even care about plays tight end.
Yes, which we'll discuss. So, yeah, maybe I like him a lot in Dynasty. I think the kid is got a lot of talent, and as much as I don't really want to sit here and talk about Watson when he has a quarterback with that kind of talent, I think he'll have a chance to really blossom. So I'm very much looking forward to next season for Bell.
Yeah.
And Deontay will be wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh. Now, there's actually more depth here than these other places, but QB play is a question mark. I still think we don't know quite exactly what we're going to get from Mitch because he's a very volatile player from week to week. Pickens is having a great camp. I mean, I don't know if we can take Pickens' hype any higher.
I certainly can.
And actually, I don't even want to ask the question the way I previously wrote it because I think we kind of know Pickens is going to be on the outside and Chase Claypool is going to be the big slot. So,
presumably, yeah.
I would just say directly for this season, who would you prefer as your wide receiver 2 out of Pittsburgh for fantasy? Would you go Pickens or stick with Claypool?
Oh my gosh! So you mean from
how much do you believe in Pickens right away off the bat?
So you mean like
year 3 wide receiver? I'm talking week 3 breakout.
Yeah. So you're asking more just from like a fan IRL standpoint.
No, legitimately from a fantasy perspective. I mean, you're on the clock. You're in the 9th, 10th round or later. So, where you go Pickens and Claypool both still available.
Because I think the answer for real life football and fantasy football is both. Shrug. Because I don't yet know exactly, but I do know definitively that with Matt Canada's offense, a lot of what they displayed early in last preseason in some of those games there's a lot of pre-snap motion, there's a lot of sweeps, there's a lot of it's the whole thing. He was also the offensive coordinator for the Maryland Terrapins once upon a time. So I'm familiar with seeing his offense. It's not hell yeah. So they did away with a lot of that last year because Ben Roethlisberger couldn't do a lot of that stuff because he was, as I've borrowed this metaphor from myself a billion different times, he was a sack of potato with a rubber band slingshot for an arm. Whatever volatility we can say about Trubisky or Pickett, who cares? They're better than old man Ben Roethlisberger. And I just have to get this off my chest as well. For years, the last several years, I would hear, around late July, early August, when, the fantasy season starts picking up again, and I would hear podcasts and people going through their early evaluations. I was like, oh, I'm a little nervous about the Pittsburgh offense this year because who knows what's going to happen with, old Ben Roethlisberger's only getting older, blah, blah, blah. I heard that for years and years and years. Now that he's finally gone and they bring in 2 people that at minimum can move in the pocket, like they're tangible upgrades over an old man version of Ben Roethlisberger. Now we're nervous because he's gone. We can't have it both ways. So like, I don't know. Like, dude, Pickens though, like between the two of them, it's clear who the better talent is. I was a huge fan of him as a prospect, and when he fell in the draft and ended up being a Steeler, I was like, yes, because red flags aside, if there's one franchise you want to go to,
yes, that's
like, dude,
I had concerns actually about picking going just slight. I mean, but yeah, as soon as he got drafted by Pittsburgh, I was all the way back in. Like,
yeah,
I just wiped out any analysis I had. Was like, okay, he's a talented wide receiver drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers at value. We know what that means.
Yes.
So yeah,
but like they're either way, like they're both still cheap enough to the point where I think you're fine, but like at least if you want to go with the safer bet of the two in terms of like, I don't know, I still think Claypool has something in him. I'm nervous about long term. I think him, like, unfortunately being on the podium, announcing the pick of Pickens was a little cruel at the actual draft, because I mean, like, I think Pickens is the reason Claypool is going to go bye-bye, but we still have this year and next year before that even happens. Like, as the big slot, there were a couple games last preseason where it looked pretty interesting with Claypool running in that. I'm interested enough in that role for him to say that it could be maybe, but if by year's end it's Pickens, I've already planted enough flags on the timeline that I'm going to be right either way.
Still taking Claypool before Pickens, but I think in general managed leagues, I'm probably taking Pickens first.
Probably.
But it's not a big difference. I mean, they're both late enough that it kind of doesn't really matter. They're depth guys, and you're just taking your shots.
Yeah.
All right. So got a couple more minutes before you got to bail. So we'll blow through the least interesting position in fantasy. We know that we've got a top 2 tight end at worst in Mark Andrews. That doesn't require a lot of analysis. We could say top 3 at worst, depending on one's opinion of Kyle Pitts. We have Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah.
Poised to take a step in year 2. I mean, we talked about the year 3 breakout, but he's kind of a guy that I don't know if I'd say breakout in year 1, but I'd say showed more than most rookie tight ends typically do. So briefly on him, we'll hit Njoku, and then we'll close it out. So real quick, Freiermuth, I mean, is he a top 12-ish guy for you? I mean, a guy that you're looking at that, again, kind of Knox, Henry, commit type range, or I know you've committed 8, but
yeah, I mean, like, I have Freiermuth at 11. I'm one spot ahead of ECR. Like, and I can confidently say, even though I haven't done my re-rank for a lot of stuff yet after the roster cuts, tight end's not really going to change for me because of anything that happened with roster cuts. So that I can say locked in probably for good. But like, and I got the case that I made for Komet earlier in this same article. I wrote about offenses that favor tight ends, and I wrote about offenses that hurt tight ends. I wrote about Pat Freiermuth in the same article. Like, I firmly believe in the talent. I think that as a dynasty asset, muy bueno, but there are a lot of, how big of a target share is he going to establish? How much of those those touchdowns are going to carry over from last year? Because, I mean, let's be real. He was an amazing red zone weapon. Like, from week 6 through week 14, like in that Thursday night game where he got his bell rung and he was never really the same after that. Like, I have that window carved out for a reason, because that was also like week 6 was around the time that Ebron and Juju got hurt and he found the field. So it's not some arbitrary window.
Right.
He led all tight ends in the NFL in red zone targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns. So like, it was nuts for a rookie. That was nuts.
That is,
but like I said before, but like I said before, talking about Komet, it's just like some of those things are not sticky year over year. So as much like I'm battling with myself on this one a little bit, which is why I have him barely above, like, falling out of the top, like the tight end 1 range, but at cost, I can't do it. And I adore Pat Freiermuth. There is so much video and audio evidence of me screaming how much I love Pat Freiermuth.
Facts.
But like, it's just like, from an objective analysis standpoint, like, it's a little bold, but if he falls far enough in a draft, like if he fell like a round and a half or two away from where he's being drafted, sure. Then at that point, I could justify that. But if there's somebody who is ranked inside the top 12 right now in ECR that is, among the likelier to not finish in that, it unfortunately is Pat Freiermuth.
And lastly, David Njoku. He's never really quite put it together, over the course of a season for the Browns, despite, again, another highly touted tight end prospect that everybody was excited about. So it has to happen, right? But still, he was a highly touted prospect. And despite not really ever actually putting together a real strong season, he got paid. I mean, paid. And seems to be a target based on preseason usage. And various Twitter people seem to think he's going to lead the NFL in targets. So what say you about David Njoku?
I have not done this research personally, but there have been multiple podcasts I've listened to. It's not just one, where people have pointed out the whole, when Jacoby Brissett's a starter, he targets the tight end at some, insane rate. Just, absolutely bonkers. And the people that have said it are smart, so I assume their research is good. So this is me passing off what I guess is technically third hand information. It's true. So just look it up.
Data.
Exactly. So I didn't look for it myself. I only heard about it. But if you're interested,
now I'm curious. What his target share to the tight end is, in percent.
It's 20 something. It's nuts, dude. It's
wow.
So just.
And with only Cooper otherwise really there to catch passes. I mean, Bell and but still young rookie. Yeah. I mean, it's basically as a flyer there at the end. I think it's a great pick.
Yeah, it ties into everything. Talking about what creates a good environment / opportunity for a fantasy tight end. And Njoku ticks all those boxes, and Brissett, for some reason, is obsessed with tight ends. So, I mean, like
rookie quarterbacks, a limited quarterback relies on the safety valve.
Yeah, dude. I have Njoku and Austin Hooper as my two biggest tight end sleepers this year.
Throw Gerald Everett in there, and I'm with you on that list.
Oh, it hurt me.
I know
too
you got
much
burned by him last year. I know you did, but he's with the Chargers now. I mean,
and honestly, dude, Jared Cook carved out a nice role for himself in his time there with Herbert. There is a non-zero chance it could really be something.
He's basically gonna need that red zone production to be something, but I think he's got a good chance that Mike Williams is the only other really big target that Herbert has. So,
it's a mid tight end too, but depending on the matchup, streaming week to week.
Oh yeah, he's the guy that if you can pick your spots right, he's going to give you a T1 weeks if you can play him in the right weeks. So
bingo.
That's really like most tight ends, you're just trying to pick the touchdown weeks. All right, so I'm going to close out. I know you need to bail, so real quick, everybody, make sure you're signing up for Prize Picks using our code ROGUE. Make sure you're signing up for Underdog using our code ROGUE. And please make sure that you're also joining our Sleeper Squad, because I know you're a fantasy player, so you're on the best fantasy app out there, which is Sleeper. But join our Pick Squad, and you can use my code, refer-FF_Tycoon, and you can get an extra $20. It's beautiful. And we're going to have top props throughout the season. We're going to have Thursday night picks. We're going to have Taco Tuesday picks. And lastly, Mr. Herms, we'll give you your plug time.
Yes, so you can follow me on Twitter at HermsNFL. That is where you can find all the stuff that I tweet about my fantasy football content that I create for Fantasy Six Pack, also Football Absurdity, and occasionally I pitch in help with FantasyPros. Woohoo! I host a podcast called The Lateral Show that you can follow on Twitter at The Lateral FF. We will be making our debut on the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel tomorrow, but if you're not watching this live, I guess that would be September 1st. So it'll be there, so look for it. It's pretty cool. And then selfishly, you talked about a couple other platforms that you could play some DFS and do some stuff.
But hey, it's huge for the boardroom. So
look, if you're interested in doing all that and you never signed up for Thrive Fantasy, if you use the promo code HERMS, boom, that is HERMS. They will match your first deposit up to $100, 100%. If you put in $100, then you'll end up with $200. If you put in $50, it'll be $100. Simple math. So just sign up. The week 1 big contest there's still some spots to fill, man. Like, honestly, like, I think it's $50K to the first person or something. Like, bro, get in there and get them picks in. Picks on picks on picks, props on props on props. Thrive Fantasy, promo code Herms. Yes.
Should we tease a little?
Once we'll have something to tell people at some point.
We'll have something to tell you, yes, in relation to
we'll have something to, yeah.
But again, yeah, we need to let Herms get onto his show, because make sure you're tuning in. Now, you're not live, but make sure you're paying attention to Herms' release. So follow him at Herms NFL so you can be in tune with the release. And once again, thank you very much, Herms, for joining. One of my favorite people, definitely my favorite person to have here in the boardroom. And with that, let's win together. And this meeting of the Fantasy Boardroom is adjourned.